the underground food system nobody talks about. Welcome back to Golden Age Gardening. I'm your host, William Scott, and today I need to show you something that will completely change how you think about food security forever. Right beneath your feet, underneath the grass in your yard, in the soil of abandoned lots and forgotten gardens, there's food growing that nobody sees. It's multiplying every single day. It's creating more nutrition with every week that passes. But here's the shocking part. Your great-grandparents understood this completely. They knew exactly what it was and how to use it. Yet somehow, in just 2 generations, this knowledge disappeared almost entirely. This isn't some rare exotic plant. This isn't something that demands special skills or unique conditions. This is food that reproduces so aggressively that governments actually spend money trying to destroy it. And that fact right there tells you everything you need to understand. When agricultural systems label something as a threat, when they invest resources in eliminating it, you need to pay attention. What they're really telling you is that this plant grows too independently, produces too much food, and refuses to be controlled. If you're new here at Golden Age Gardening, hit that subscribe button right now. We uncover forgotten food knowledge every single week, the kinds of survival crops that kept entire populations alive during desperate times. While most preppers waste money on plastic buckets and expired meals, the real food security is already growing beneath the ground, waiting for someone smart enough to recognize it. To my returning community members, thank you for your loyalty. You understand that real survival food isn't something you buy. It's something you grow, something that multiplies on its own, something that literally feeds itself while you sleep.
The invisible multiplication happening right now. What I'm about to explain will shift your entire understanding of food production. Underneath the surface of Earth everywhere, in fields, yards, parks, and vacant properties, there exists a complete food system that almost nobody recognizes. You step on it daily. You cut it with your mower. You have zero idea that beneath that surface, there's an expanding network of edible underground bulbs multiplying constantly. Each bulb producing 5, 10, even 20 more bulbs. Food creation happening automatically, around the clock, without any human effort. This is precisely how people survived periods of extreme hunger. Not through food stored in containers that eventually run empty, not through hunting animals, which depends on wildlife being available, but through underground food sources that never stop producing, regardless of what happens on the surface. Wars can rage, droughts can destroy fields, economies can collapse. Nothing touches the food growing underground. It just keeps multiplying. The plant I'm describing is Jerusalem artichoke, also known as sunchoke. Before you think this is merely another gardening suggestion, understand what this truly represents. This is a food production method that solves the core problem facing every person preparing for hard times. What happens when your emergency supplies are gone, when the canned goods are empty, when packaged meals no longer exist, when everything you've stored has been consumed? Then what? Jerusalem artichokes provide the answer, because they don't become depleted, they expand. You harvest some, you leave some. What remains turns into additional food. It's the complete opposite of a stockpile that counts down toward nothing. It's food that builds upward toward infinity when you manage it properly. Please share this with someone in your life who cares about real food security. This content needs to reach more people who understand that true preparation means growing food, not just buying it.
How the multiplication actually functions. Let me explain the actual mechanics of how this expansion works, because grasping this idea changes everything about how you approach nutrition security. You begin with merely 10 bulbs, just 10. You place them in soil during spring. By the time autumn arrives, every single one of those 10 bulbs has generated 10 to 20 brand new bulbs. You now possess 100 to 200 bulbs from your original investment of 10. That represents a 10 to 20 times increase in just half a year. But here's where things become truly interesting. You gather and consume the majority of these bulbs. Let's say you eat 170 of them. You deliberately or accidentally leave 30 in the earth. Those 30 bulbs survive the winter underground. When spring returns, they grow. By the second harvest season, those 30 have transformed into 300 to 600 bulbs. You consume 500, leaving 100. By the third year, those 100 have become 1,000 to 2,000 bulbs. Do you see the pattern developing? Your food quantity isn't dropping. It's multiplying faster and faster. By year 5, you'll have accumulated such an enormous quantity of Jerusalem artichokes that consuming them all becomes impossible. You'll be gifting them to others. You'll be feeding animals with them. Your concern shifts from scarcity to abundance. And this entire transformation began with just 10 bulbs and basically no labor. Compare this to literally every other food production method. Stored goods run out. Hunting exhausts wildlife populations. Fishing depletes fish. Growing annual vegetables demand new seeds you must somehow obtain each season. But bulbs that multiply underground, they simply continue. They're the closest thing to unlimited food that nature provides.
The historical evidence, real people, real famines. This isn't theoretical discussion. Actual human beings survived actual starvation through exactly this method. The evidence is documented and undeniable. During the Great Potato Famine affecting Ireland, individuals who cultivated Jerusalem artichokes survived. When the Great Depression struck America, rural families managing Jerusalem artichoke fields ate while their urban neighbors went hungry. During World War II in Europe, Jerusalem artichokes kept communities alive when all other food systems collapsed. Why did this happen? Because Jerusalem artichokes possess specific characteristics that make them the ideal survival crop. First, they remain underground. Surface crops get stolen, taken by authorities, or destroyed during conflict. Underground food stays invisible. Nobody realizes it exists unless you tell them. That's food security through staying hidden. Second, they require zero storage structure. When famines occur, storage facilities fail. Grain warehouses get emptied, warehouses disappear. But Jerusalem artichokes don't need any of that. They store themselves. They remain beneath the ground fresh and edible until you decide to dig them. The earth itself becomes your storage facility. Unlike stored products that break down over time, bulbs left underground stay fresh in spring as they were in autumn. Third, they endure being forgotten. During times of crisis and starvation, people lack energy to maintain gardens properly. They're overwhelmed with daily survival, weakened by hunger, disrupted by chaos. Jerusalem artichokes don't require this attention. You can completely disregard them and they flourish anyway. They're incredibly resistant to destruction, even if you attempt to eliminate them. That's exactly the kind of food you want when society starts breaking apart. Fourth, they multiply even when harvested. Most food sources decrease when you take from them. You eat your grain supplies and you have fewer supplies. You catch fish and fewer fish remain. But Jerusalem artichokes don't reduce what you have. You always leave some bulbs behind, and those regenerate the entire group. You can harvest from the same patch indefinitely without it ever shrinking. It grows larger. The siege of Leningrad during World War II continued for 900 consecutive days. Over 1 million people starved during that terrible period. The survivors weren't those with the largest food stockpiles. Stored food disappeared within the first several months. The people who made it through were those understanding which wild plants to gather and which crops kept producing despite the siege conditions. Jerusalem artichokes existed in established gardens and field borders near Leningrad. Throughout those 900 days of bombardment and hunger, people extracted bulbs from the ground. Even amid the worst destruction and starvation, this invisible multiplying food source continued producing. Those bulbs saved families. In America's Great Depression period, families in agricultural regions who grew Jerusalem artichokes had enormous survival advantages. While unemployed people in cities waited in food lines, farming families dug tubers from the earth. These provided nutrition when paychecks couldn't buy anything. Since Jerusalem artichokes expand and spread, families starting the Depression with small patches finished it with large productive areas. Recorded accounts exist of Depression families that exchanged Jerusalem artichoke bulbs for other items. The bulbs became valuable currency because they represented food that multiplied. Someone obtaining bulbs as payment had both immediate nutrition and the ability to plant for endless future food. That became more valuable than actual money during economic collapse.
What the numbers mean for your health. Calories keep you alive. Nutrition determines whether you stay healthy or develop diseases from missing essential nutrients. Jerusalem artichokes provide primarily carbohydrates, giving approximately 70 to 80 calories per 100 grams. This matches what you get from potatoes. The carbs consist mainly of inulin, a prebiotic fiber that feeds beneficial bacteria in your digestive system. Protein content is low at about 2 grams per 100 grams, so these bulbs won't serve as your primary protein source, but they provide excellent carbohydrates and energy. During starvation, calories prevent death. While protein matters, if you don't consume enough calories, your body will break down its own muscle tissue for energy and you'll die regardless. Calories come first, then protein. Jerusalem artichokes also contain iron, potassium, vitamin B, and additional micronutrients. They're not nutritionally complete on their own, but they form a solid foundation. Mix Jerusalem artichokes with small quantities of protein and fat from any source, small animals, fish, gathered green plants containing protein, and you have complete nutrition supporting indefinite survival. One nutrition consideration involves digestive adjustment. Jerusalem artichokes contain inulin, which your body's digestive system can't fully break down naturally. Your gut bacteria ferment it instead, which may create gas and bloating initially, particularly if you consume large quantities suddenly. The solution involves gradual introduction. Begin with small portions. Give your gut bacteria 1 to 2 weeks to adjust. Afterward, you'll tolerate larger amounts without digestive problems. This adjustment process is vital for survival preparation. Don't wait until you're forced to survive entirely on Jerusalem artichokes to discover they upset your digestion. Build tolerance now while you have other food choices. Eat them consistently in modest amounts. Your digestive system will prepare itself, and during genuine crisis, they'll be food you digest successfully.
Establishing your hidden food supply. Creating this underground food source requires preparation before crisis arrives. You cannot establish Jerusalem artichokes during actual starvation. You establish them years beforehand. Then, when hardship comes, you already have food multiplying silently beneath the surface, while everyone around you panics. Starting this process is remarkably simple. You need bulbs. Purchase them from gardening suppliers, or occasionally from grocery stores where they get sold as sunchokes. Beginning with merely 10 to 20 bulbs creates your permanent food system. Plant them during spring once freezing temperatures finish. Dig holes 4 to 6 inches deep. Spice individual bulbs 12 to 18 inches apart. Fill the holes with soil, water once, then essentially forget about them. They'll grow 6 to 10 feet tall during summer months. Beautiful, sunflower-like yellow blooms will appear. When fall frost kills the green parts, you dig and find your 10 bulbs have become 100 or more. The strategy for creating a survival food supply involves harvesting cautiously throughout the initial years. Year 1 might mean harvesting half and leaving half. Year 2, harvest 2/3 and preserve 1/3. By year 3 or 4, the population becomes so large that you can harvest 90% and still have abundant regeneration. This is exactly the kind of information that Golden Age Gardening was created to share. Like this video if you're seeing the value here. Comment below telling me whether you're considering planting these or if you already have them. Managing expansion depends on your specific objectives. With limited space, you must contain Jerusalem artichokes because they spread persistently. Employ barriers, raised containers with solid bottoms, or comprehensive boundary harvesting. However, if your goal is creating maximum survival food production, allow them to spread. Let them naturalize. Develop large, productive regions that supply abundant nutrition.
The practical reality during crisis. Let me paint you a realistic picture of what this looks like in actual practice during genuine hardship. Imagine it's 3 years into economic breakdown. Retail stores have remained empty for many months. Your community is consumed through stored supplies, and reserves are becoming critically low. Hunting pressure has destroyed local animal populations. Fishing areas are over-harvested. People are turning desperate. But you walk out to a section of your property that appears unremarkable. Perhaps some open ground, possibly some dried plant stalks remaining from the previous season. You dig using a shovel, maybe simply a stick, and extract 5, 10, 15 bulbs, each roughly the size of a small potato. You gather them in a container. You go inside. You have substantial food, real calories. Tomorrow, you can repeat this identical action, and the day after that. For months, you can harvest hundreds of pounds. Simultaneously, your neighbors have no clue that food exists. They observe bare ground. They don't understand that beneath that surface sits an entire food production system. You haven't announced it. You haven't discussed it publicly. It's your personal hidden supply. That's genuine food security through knowledge and advanced preparation. And here's what makes this beautiful. Even while harvesting, the supply doesn't decrease because you inevitably leave bulbs behind. Smaller ones you didn't locate, fragments that separated during digging, bulbs positioned too deep to retrieve conveniently. All of those continue producing. The following spring, the population regrows. By that fall, you harvest again. This hidden food supply persists perpetually. That's the food security that truly functions during extended crisis. Not a 5-year supply of packaged meals that gets depleted. Not hunting that destroys local game populations, but food that reproduces itself, remains concealed from people who don't understand what they're observing, persists through chaos and disruption.
Understanding the invasive classification. Here's something important to address. Many states classify Jerusalem artichokes as invasive. Growing them gets discouraged or technically prohibited in certain areas. Why? Because they expand aggressively and prove very difficult to control. Agricultural industries view them as problematic because they outcompete crops and resist destruction. But let's consider what this actually communicates. Invasive is the term used by systems demanding control. A plant that expands successfully, resists killing, produces abundantly, that gets called invasive. Yet from a survival food perspective, those characteristics represent exactly what you want. You desire food that spreads. You want food difficult to eliminate. You need food that multiplies profusely. The classification of Jerusalem artichokes as invasive actually confirms their tremendous value as survival food. If they weren't so vigorous, so successful, so impossible to manage, nobody would label them invasive. The exact traits that make conventional agriculture view them as invasive are the precise traits making them ideal famine food.
Building your hidden network. I want to provide specific, practical guidance on creating a hidden food supply. Establish multiple small patches instead of one obvious large area. Distribute them throughout your property in spots that don't immediately draw attention. Edge locations, back sections, regions that appear wild or unmaintained. This strategy accomplishes two objectives. If one patch gets discovered or damaged, others remain. It appears natural rather than deliberately cultivated. Additionally, manage visibility deliberately. Jerusalem artichokes reach 6 to 10 feet during growing season, quite noticeable. If you're concerned about observation, plant them beside other tall plants, along fence lines where height is normal, or in areas hidden by trees or structures. The goal remains food production that doesn't announce itself. Harvesting should happen discreetly too. Don't dig in view of neighbors or passing people. Don't leave obvious evidence of digging. Don't establish obvious paths to your patches. The food stays hidden by appearing like it isn't there. You know it exists. Others don't need knowledge of it. Storing harvested bulbs is straightforward. Jerusalem artichokes keep for several weeks in cool areas, longer with cold storage. But the most effective storage method remains leaving them underground. Harvest only what you'll consume during the next week or two. Leave everything else in the ground until you need it. This eliminates storage difficulties and keeps your food supply hidden. These bulbs work well prepared in multiple ways. Roasting caramelizes their natural sugars, creating a sweet, nutty flavor. They can be boiled and mashed, similarly to potatoes. They work in soups and stews. You can slice them thin and fry them as chips. They even preserve well through pickling. The easiest preparation is roasting. Clean the bulbs, toss with a bit of oil if available. Roast at 400 degrees for 30 to 40 minutes until soft. Season with salt if you have it. That's simple survival food providing calories and acceptable taste. During genuine hunger, acceptable taste combined with calories is sufficient.
Expanding your production. Seed saving and expansion follow straightforward principles. Jerusalem artichokes don't produce seeds traditionally. They reproduce through bulbs, so saving seed simply means keeping bulbs. Each fall during harvest, intentionally leave some bulbs in the ground for next year. Additionally, set aside your best bulbs in storage to plant in new locations. The expansion approach means establishing new patches annually. Every year, plant portions of your harvest in different areas. Over 5 to 10 years, you transform your whole property into a landscape containing hidden food production. By the time crisis hits, you have a mature network of productive patches that most people wouldn't recognize as food. You can also distribute bulbs with trusted family, companions, or neighbors who grasp their significance. Creating a community group of people managing established Jerusalem artichoke patches creates shared food security. During crisis, you're not isolated. Your entire network possesses access to multiplying food. Your collective situation has strength that individual families don't.
Calculating what you actually need. How many patches constitute enough for genuine famine survival? That depends on how many individuals you're feeding and what additional food sources you possess. But roughly, a 10 by 10 foot patch, 100 square feet, produces 100 to 200 pounds of bulbs yearly once established. 100 pounds of Jerusalem artichokes gives approximately 35,000 to 40,000 calories. That supplies about 20 days of nutrition for an average grown person. Therefore, if you wanted year-round calories from these bulbs exclusively, you'd require approximately 18 such patches. That represents 1,800 square feet, roughly the size of a small home's footprint. Remember, you're not living solely on Jerusalem artichokes. You're using them as a calorie base. If these bulbs supply 50% of your calories and different sources provide the remainder, you need half as many patches. Even modest plantings provide meaningful food security. For a family of 4 people, I recommend establishing minimum 5 to 10 separate patches of 100 square feet each over multiple years. That's 500 to 1,000 square feet complete, which most properties can manage. That production quantity provides substantial calorie protection during hardship. For those of you just discovering Golden Age gardening, please subscribe and turn on notifications. Every week, we reveal forgotten food sources that modern culture abandoned. Your family's future security depends on knowledge like this. Here's something most individuals overlook. Jerusalem artichokes also function as trading currency during breakdown. Bulbs can get exchanged with neighbors for items or labor. Someone receiving bulbs gains immediate food and the ability to plant for perpetual nutrition. That provides greater value than paper money during collapse. Building extra productive capacity specifically for trading creates both food security and economic security.
The realistic timeline for preparation. If you begin today, here's what happens across the years. Spring of year 1, you plant 20 bulbs in 2 small patches. Fall of year 1, you harvest 100 to 200 bulbs. You consume some, plant some in new spots, leave some in original patches. Spring of year 2, you're now expanding to 4 to 6 patches. Fall of year 2, you harvest 500 to 1,000 bulbs. By year 3, you've created established production across your property. By year 5, your patches produce abundantly and maturely. If crisis arrives in year 6,